Welcome to Pedo Teeth Talk, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, a show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professional specializing in pediatric dentistry and promotes the highest standards of patient care with today's top experts in the field. Now here's your host, Dr. Joel Berg.
Thank you for tuning in to Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice. Brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. Thank you to our Pedo Teeth Talk sponsor, Hugh Freedy Group, for helping us bring you great content. We couldn't do this without them. Visit them at www.hughfreedy.com/APDcrowns. That's HUFREDY-group.com/APDcrowns. We are here today with Dr. Michael Webb. Mike grew up in the Chicago area and attended DePaul University before obtaining his DDS from Northwestern University. He then completed a certificate in pediatric dentistry at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, and then a certificate in dental anesthesiology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine. In addition to his clinical training, Dr. Webb has a certificate in healthcare administration, a master's in education with a concentration in adult learning, and recently completed a graduate certificate in health professions education at East Carolina University. He previously taught at Baylor College of Dentistry. He was the graduate program director and chief of dental services at Children's Medical Center of Dallas. He then was the graduate program director in pediatric dentistry at Virginia Commonwealth University before opening a private practice that focused on office sedation and general anesthesia. Dr. Webb returned to academics in 2014 to become the director of the pediatric dentistry residency at the East Carolina University School of Dental Medicine. Dr. Webb was named chair, Department of Pediatric Dentistry and Orthodontics and Dental Facial Orthopedics at ECU in January of 2018. In July of 22, Dr. Webb was named the inaugural Jasper L. Lewis Jr. Distinguished Scholar in Pediatric Dentistry at the ECU School of Dental Medicine. Dr. Webb is currently an advanced life support emergency medical technician attendant in charge with Forest View Volunteer Rescue, Chesterfield Fire and EMS, which is part of an urban 911 EMS system. He holds EMT certifications in Virginia, North Carolina, and has served as a field training officer for both patient care and emergency driving. Mike, thanks for being with us on Pedo Teeth Talk.
Joel, it's good to be here with you.
Well, Mike, you and I chatted recently about your role as an EMT, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But as I read your bio, it's not common to have so much training and education, formal training. And I want to do another podcast with you right now and just call an audible here because one of the issues we face in dental education, just to mention, I'm preaching to the choir here apparently, but that most of us are trained in dentistry, not in education. So I'd love to talk to you sometime about what does it mean to have training in education? But we won't go there today. We got plenty to talk about. So okay. EMT, you've got the background for it. It makes sense. Why did you decide to become an EMT? EMT, rather.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was actually an EMT before I went to dental school.
Okay.
I was prior to dental school, I was an athletic trainer. I was an athletic trainer at DePaul University, and we trained as EMTs as part of that emergency response. And if you watch the recent Buffalo Bills game, how important that training can be when it's needed in sports medicine. So that's where I got started, and I've stayed certified on and off over the last many years, and have seen a lot of changes in emergency medicine and field emergency medicine. So it's just something I had an interest in early on and just maintained.
Were you watching that game live on TV when that incident occurred?
I usually don't watch pro ball, and for some reason I switched that on and saw it happen. And wow. I was sitting there with my wife, and she's an EMT also, and we both, as soon as we saw it happen, like our instincts kicked in, and we were, something's wrong, something needs to be done, this is bad, So we have that in our DNA, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. So you're still an EMT now, as we just read, and you've been doing it. You said you did it before you went to dental school. Is that correct? You were an EMT?
Right. I think I'm in my 45th year of being an EMT. It's been a while, so.
Why do you still do it? I'm just curious. I mean, I can imagine, but tell us why you're still doing it.
It's one of the ways that I give back to the community. It really dovetails with my interest in teaching. I get to teach some young people, the newer EMTs coming along, and I've seen, just as we've seen, and you've spent time in dental education, so you've had people you've seen go on to do great things, and I've seen the same thing in the EMT world. I've got people that I've trained that are now physicians, and actually one of the EMTs I worked with is now one of our what's called operations medical director, so he's over me now and tells me what to do. So because we operate on their protocols, but so it's just a bunch of things that sort of come together, and the service aspect and just giving back to our community. There's also a camaraderie among us. It's kind of like being in the police force or the fire department or the military. Once you've kind of done EMS for a while, you've got we sort of flock together, just like pediatric dentists flock together. So
it's like in your blood. You feel like a camaraderie.
It's in our blood,
said. Yeah. So I think there are a couple of medical schools that I'm aware of that either have required EMT training or have considered EMT training prior to going to medical school. Are you aware of that, or can you comment? And you did it yourself as an individual, obviously.
Right. And there's actually, and I cannot remember the school, but I think some schools actually make that as part of their curriculum. I don't know if they go through the whole certification process, but they go through the training as an EMT in first or second year medical school, so that they at least have those basic knowledge of how to deal with an emergency.
Yeah, and I think us in pediatric dentistry, obviously, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but we have the need to know a lot of what an EMT does in an emergency situation. Tell us a little bit about the distinction between the training or the prerequisites to be an EMT. I know that we know what a paramedic is a little bit. Paramedics are usually firefighters first, my understanding, but is that correct, first of all, and what's the distinction?
Yeah, that's not completely true. There are some people that are paramedics and are not firefighters, and vice versa, and some are both. Usually it goes together. The fire service has basically assumed emergency medical services, and when you look at large departments, the vast with modern building materials and things like that, the vast majority of calls are EMS, so a lot of them are EMTs or paramedics, and there's basically three different levels of EMT. There's the basic EMT, there's something called the advanced EMT, and then there's there's kind of an oddball in there that's still around called an EMTI. That's what I am, and then there's a paramedic. So in Virginia, I can do almost everything a paramedic can do, and in Virginia they don't distinguish between all those levels. You're either BLS or ALS, so I'm just considered ALS. So
what does the I stand for in EMT?
Intermediate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that was a distinction that was a few years ago, and it's kind of gone away now. But those of us that are still at that level maintain it. So.
Wow, I'm a big fan of listening to you and hear that you're an EMT, because when I had my practice at the university in Seattle, one of my patients, two boys, their dad was the chief paramedic, and we got to know each other, and he invited me to do a ride-along, and I actually did that 4 or 5 times over the course of several years, and it was just fascinating. I did not know, as you just said, that at least in Seattle, 80% of the calls to firefighters are actually medical, not fires. I had no idea, and so I got to see all this, so I have a deep appreciation for what you do.
Yeah, in King County, which is where Seattle is, as you know, is kind of ground zero that's where kind of everything started with the paramedic programs, and it was discovered that if you were injured on the battlefield, you had a much better chance of survival than if you had a car accident in a major metropolitan area. So they took a lot of that. Unfortunately, a lot of it came from military experience.
Yeah. And it was incredible, really, to watch. I used to describe it as, the work when they had what they called a CPR. They called them CPRs, life support some sort. And I would watch the firefighters who were there first, and then they'd call the paramedics. And the firefighters were kind of like nurses, and the paramedics were kind of like doctors. But the way they worked together so beautifully was like an orchestra. It was really incredible. And then the patient would survive, and they'd take him I'd ride along and go to the ED somewhere. And then the chaos in the ED, it was like compared to the orchestration of the firefighters and the paramedics. I don't know if that's your observation as well.
Yeah, when I had a steady partner, you don't have to talk a lot. Just like in dentistry, your assistant knows what you want.
Right.
What the other person's doing. So it does become more of when you're working with the same team, it becomes more of an orchestrated event than when you have different people and people you're not used to working with and that sort of thing. So, but can I interrupt here for a second and just tell there's a big before I forget, there's a big connection between EMS and pediatric dentistry. I don't know if you know Frank Farrington.
Yes, I do.
Right. Frank's dad was Deke Farrington, and Deke Farrington wrote the original EMT curriculum. He was an orthopedic surgeon in Wisconsin. He wrote a seminal article in the 60s called Death in the Ditch, and that's where it all started. And, I worked with Frank a little bit. Frank's gone now, and rest his soul, but Frank showed me some of the original things that his dad had written, so it was quite a thing to see. His dad helped. At the time, it was Mercury Meteor ambulances, design ambulances. I mean, and Frank was able to show me all these artifacts and things from his dad's collection. So I hope that stuff is still around.
Oh, that's fascinating. We will now pause for a word from our sponsor. Ufridi Group provides world-class products, services, and education, resulting in superior clinician outcomes. For more information, please visit www.ufridigroup.com/AAPD crowns. We are back with Dr. Michael Webb. We're talking about his role as an EMT, even before he was in dental school, and he's still an EMT. We're hearing why and how fascinating that is. But Mike, to tie this into pediatric dentistry education, you're also a consummate pediatric dental educator on many levels. So how does being an EMT help you as a pediatric dental educator?
I think when you're a lot of things I talk about are medical emergencies and things like that, and I think that when students at whatever level, either the C level or dental student level, they know I've done it. They know I've been out there. They know I've treated those patients. Been in those experiences, and in not the sort of sterile environment rather that a dental office is. If a patient faints in a dental office, it's usually they're in the chair. It's not necessarily. It's a big deal, but it's not. They fainted and they rolled down a hill and then they broke their leg, and by the way, they're diabetic and it's raining outside. So it gets a little more complex when we get out in the field.
Well, that's an amazing experience. This is really inspiring. So tell us some of the maybe more challenging things that you've encountered as an EMT.
Well, Joel, nobody calls us when they're having a good day. Everybody's having a bad day when they call us, to some degree. And we have to be sensitive to that. And, we try to impart to our young EMTs that there's no good call. People are having a bad day when they call us. So unfortunately, I've had to, pronounce people in the field and tell loved ones that their family member has died, or, we get into domestic disputes in the middle of those, people having mental health crises, and like I said before, even the simplest thing can become a challenge. And I actually did have the patient that fainted, rolled down a hill, was diabetic, and broke his leg, and so and he was wedged between two fences, and I had to get some firefighters to help me carry him back up that hill, and then so it was no big deal that he had a broken leg per se in our world, but it was, all those other things trying to get him to the ambulance. Oh, and it was about 140 degrees out, I think, too, that day. So we were all sweating. So.
Wow. So when you started dental school, I imagine some of this content and the basic sciences and clinical courses was pretty familiar to you. You were probably teaching others just from what you already learned as an EMT, I would imagine.
Well, I remember that we did have a lab. In those days, we had all these labs, and one of the labs we had to draw blood and do blood counts, and so I did help with that and those sorts of things when they needed it.
So is there anything that would surprise us about what an EMT does? You've told us some of the challenging things, but what might I be surprised about?
Well, I think it's the spectrum of things, really. I think that there's the it's pretty dangerous. There's more EMS personnel killed every year than fire and police combined. We're working especially with automobile accidents, working out on a highway. I wish people would just slow down. I hate to hear those cars whizzing by me as I'm trying to extricate a patient from a wrecked automobile. And then there's the other end, that's sort of the mundane things of the paper towels in the kitchen at the station need to be replaced. The truck needs to be washed. Those sorts of things. So we have sort of those two ends of the spectrums that we have to do.
You have to do everything. I remember restocking the vehicle. After a visit on the road, you come back, have to restock, and the junior guy does that, I think. So how do you decide when you get to a site? Do you put the lights and siren on and rush as fast as you can to the hospital, or do you attend to the patient until you're done what you need to do right in the spot? How do you make that decision?
That's based on the patient's condition, Joel. You would think that something like a cardiac arrest, we'd want to run to the hospital real quick, but interruption of CPR is very important, or non-interruption of CPR is very important for survival. And you can't do good quality CPR in the back of a moving truck. So we colloquially we call it either stay and play or throw and go. And so if I can do everything for the patient that the hospital can do, we're going to stay and do that. And that's typically cardiac arrest and breathing problems. Okay. Things that I can't help with, internal bleeding from massive car injury, a big car injury that's got massive internal bleeding, multi-system trauma. They need a surgeon. They need, bright lights and cold steel. They need sharp knives on them. They need, that. So right. I need to get those folks to the hospital really quickly because they need the trauma surgeon. So it just depends on what the patient needs. But I was just reading a statistic recently that it's somewhere in the 80 to 90%, whether we run lights and sirens doesn't matter for patient outcome. Yeah. Because we can do a lot of things now in the back of our trucks that,
Right.
And the extra couple minutes that it takes to get to especially in an urban setting, it's kind of different where I am now, but in Richmond, Virginia area, I'm no more than 10 minutes to a hospital.
Okay.
Here, it's a lot farther. So
yeah,
you get out in the rural areas.
You need more you need to think about staying rather than leaving. It makes sense. So we in dentistry, and you were obviously in both, what we think about continuing education. How do you maintain your skills? You've been doing this for 40 years, but somebody else who had only done it for a few, what kind of CE requirements are there, out of curiosity?
Yeah, that sort of varies from state to state too. The state of Virginia, I have to do 55 hours, and that's 55 clock hours every 2 years. So
about the same as dentistry, roughly. Roughly.
Right. Yeah, we have to do the difference is we have specific areas we have to cover. So I have to do so many hours of cardiology, so many hours of breathing, so many hours of pediatrics, so many hours of obstetrics. People don't realize we do obstetrics. So so we have to do that every 2 years. And a lot of that we can do online now, but unlike some CE courses where you can sign in and go eat lunch or whatever, these are clocked. So we when I sit down to watch a video, I have to watch the whole video, and then I can, if I take the test too soon, it won't let me take the test. So.
Wow. I remember, I was telling you that I did that ride along. One of the things that you're probably familiar with, they have this little heavy device that the strongest guy carries up 5 flights of stairs, and it has the paddles on it. It has everything, the ECG, everything, and it also records the audio of what's going on. So when they give drugs, it records when and the time of all this. Then I think they have 100% like an M&M conference afterwards, and they go back and they sit as a team and discuss what they did right and what they could do differently. And I think that's what when you're accrediting, King County, they would say it's because they have 100% compliance with this kind of revisiting the case. Is that commonly done? Where you go back and look at everyone?
We don't look at everyone, and that's a great QA program. And I know that King County is one of the best. I do work with a few medics that as soon as we get done with a run, they will sit there and go over what we did, what we could have done better, how we could have worked together better, what we could have done better for the patient. Should we have done something faster? Should we not have done something as fast? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. And just kind of review those protocols. It's kind of like our huddle with dentistry in reverse. When I do a huddle with the dental students, if a child's coming in with asthma, okay, what are we going to do if the child has an asthma attack? What are we going to do? And I always tell them, run and get Dr. Webb's not the answer. So I want them to think. So,
well, you have a very calm and soothing demeanor. I imagine those patients who encounter you on the worst day of their life are probably soothed by your presence. So that's a real positive attribute. Finally, I would say you've inspired me, and I think many, and I encounter pediatric dentists all the time who they just want to do something different mid to late stage of their career, and this sounds really intriguing. So is it reasonable to think that a more senior pediatric dentist or mid-career even could decide to become an EMT and volunteer or do something? Is that a reasonable thing to do?
Oh, I think it's very reasonable. I know especially with COVID, a lot of the community volunteer squads have lost a lot of members, and they're always looking for people. And I think it's just I think the training's great. I think that I think it gives you a much broader way of thinking about medical emergencies. So I think it's very doable.
Wow. Go, please continue.
I was just going to say the only thing is I don't know, doing the 24-hour shifts anymore is a little harder as we get a little older. You still have to be able to lift at least 125 pounds. You have to walk up those 5 flights of stairs carrying the monitor, as you said. I
did it a couple times. It wasn't fun. Yeah,
it's a little physically demanding.
Yes, it is.
But it's fun.
Wow, well, this was amazing, Mike. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us to share your experience and expertise on Pedo Teeth Talk.
Well, thank you, Joel. It's been a pleasure being here.
Do you need additional CE hours but don't have time to travel to courses? Did you attend annual session and want to listen to the audio recordings? Check out AAPD's new Education Passport. The redesigned and improved Education Passport is AAPD's online learning center, where you can earn CE and listen to audio recordings from all of our continuing education courses and more. Visit educationpassport.aapd.org for more information. For 10% off any product, use discount code TEETHTALK in the Education Passport store. Pedo Teeth Talk is the show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professionals specializing in pediatric dentistry. Be sure to check out previous episodes of Pedo Teeth Talk, as well as our other podcast platform, Newly Erupted. All previous episodes are available on our website. We welcome your ideas for future shows and guests. For more information on the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, visit aapd.org.